If you're in the market for a new Android phone and the camera is extremely important to you, the S23 Ultra and the Pixel 8 Pro are two of the best options. But which one is better? Is it the S23 Ultra with its impressive 200 megapixel sensor and dual telephoto lenses? Or is it the Pixel 8 Pro with its more modest 50 megapixel sensor, but with Google's incredible image processing? Well, we have 21 individual test categories to find out. Starting off with some outdoor shots, in this first one we can see how both phones took a very different approach in terms of the processing. Google kept it more natural, while Samsung decided to raise the shadows quite considerably, resulting in a noticeably brighter image. When we zoom in, we can see how Samsung added a ton of sharpening, which I'm not really a fan of myself, but then at the same time, on the bottom left-hand side, the Pixel was just way too blurry. Overall, I do prefer the Pixel's image here. This next photo was shot in a very bright scene with the sun directly above. And then you also had this shadowy area where the bushes are. And here, the Pixel is able to create a much more HDR looking image, where we have a very good balance between the dark and the light areas of it. The only downside being the sky, which does get a bit blown out. At the same time, Samsung does expose the sky better, but loses a lot of detail in the shadows. Again, I do prefer the Pixel here. Next up, we have this garden shot, which looks very similar on both. Samsung did saturate the colors more, especially if you look at the greens. However, it did apply this green tint on the fence, and it also overly sharpened everything to the point where we lose that natural depth of field that the Pixel has. And lastly, we have this beautiful shot of the autumn leaves, and once again, the Pixel does a much better job here. The colors are spot on, whereas Samsung raised the shadows way too much to the point where we lose all of that color. And again, Samsung tends to over-sharpen everything severely to the point where everything looks way lower res, despite Samsung trying to achieve the exact opposite with their over-sharpening. So in terms of everyday outdoor shots, the Pixel 8 Pro does indeed have significantly better image processing, resulting in superior results in almost every case. Now, on a separate note, last week we dropped our first two October packs for our app wallpapers, the Stellar Starfall and the Happy Halloween packs, with some stunning designs in each. Tomorrow, we're dropping two more packs at 5 p.m. UK time. So feel free to take a guess on Instagram as to what name the new packs have. And quick reminder that we're also doing an iPhone 15 and 15 Pro giveaway to celebrate the launch of wallpapers. Details on how to enter in the description box down below. Moving on to some indoor shots, they're both pretty good here. The Pixel does have more natural looking colors. For example, the sky was indeed gray, whereas Samsung made it look blue. And once we zoom into the chairs, Samsung does seem to have more detail, whereas the Pixel is more noisy. Although it is quite hard to tell if it's natural detail or a result of Samsung's over-sharpening. In the second indoor shot, I much prefer Samsung's result, as we not only get a brighter image, but we do indeed see more detail once we zoom in, and we also see less noise if we zoom into the bonsai tree, for example. So in terms of indoor shots, the S23 Ultra does seem to be superior. So what about zoom? The Pixel has a single 5x optical zoom module, whereas Samsung has two. One at 3x and the other at 10x. If we compare the results at 5x, which is where the Pixel would be using its native optical zoom, while Samsung would be using its 3x and then zooming in digitally, unsurprisingly, the Pixel performs better, with a much clearer image, better shadow detail if you look at the trees, and an overall brighter image too. If we switch to 10x, this is where the wheels turn. And this time, Samsung is using its native 10x module, while the Pixel is using its 5x and zooms in digitally. And indeed, the S23 Ultra is much clearer, especially if you take a look at my face or my jacket, although it does seem to still over-sharpen everything compared to the more natural look on the Pixel. If we zoom in even further to 25x, this is where they would both be using digital zoom. And because Samsung only has to zoom in from 10x as opposed to 5x on the Pixel, we do get a much better result with minimal noise, clearer text, and most importantly, a much more vibrant look as opposed to the more washed out look on the Pixel. So if you care about zoom, especially at longer ranges, the S23 Ultra will be superior. Now, if you're getting any of these two phones, you probably know that none of them come with a charger. So that's where our sponsor Ugreen comes in. Ugreen's new Nexode 300 watt 5-port fast charger is the ultimate charger for all of your devices. With 4 USB-Cs and 1 USB-A, you'll never look for another plug again. Their impressive 140 watt dedicated USB-C port with their hyper-fast power delivery 3.1 charging protocol offers variable voltage power for multiple devices. meaning that you can charge a 16-inch MacBook Pro to 50% and an iPhone 15 to 60% in just 30 minutes. On top of that, you can also fast charge your tablet, watch, and earbuds from one unit, reducing the charges that you need on your desk. Their GaN and SiC chips offers great heat dissipation with their thermal guard system, which ensures you're safe by monitoring temperature changes 6,000 times per minute. Check out Ugreen's reduced launch price, available for 2 weeks, by using the link below. Moving on to portrait mode, we're going to start off with portrait mode pet, and here, both did quite well, but Samsung did a bit better by having an even more superior hair separation if you take a look at Ren's hairs. Not only that, but the colors are also better preserved on the Samsung. If we now test portrait mode person at 2x on both, they both do about as good of a job when it comes to the hair separation. But Samsung does have a considerably more stylized image that is brighter, sharper, and also more vibrant. And lastly, when it comes to portrait mode objects, I'm actually surprised by how well Samsung does here, with an almost perfect edge detection and separation. The Pixel does have considerably more background blur, but it did mess up in a few areas in terms of the edge separation. So yeah, pretty safe to say that Samsung does have the overall superior portrait mode. So what about the ultrawide module? Well, it seems that Google does have a wider lens, both vertically, if you take a look at a grill on the floor, and horizontally, if you take a look at a house on the left. Once we zoom in, we can see that the Pixel does have a slightly sharper image, and in terms of the image processing, this is a matter of taste. Samsung has a far contrastier image, whereas Google really likes to process their HDR images as much as possible. Personally, I do prefer the Pixel here, although, like I said, this is fully a matter of taste. If we take a look at another ultrawide shot, the tables kind of turn, with Samsung brightening the image way more and Google having a more contrasty look this time. I do feel like Samsung brightened up everything a bit too much, as some areas are even blown out and some colors are just way too vibrant. The reflection in the water, for example, kind of looks like a bunch of blue flowers rather than, the more natural look that the Pixel has. If we test the ultrawide indoors, once again we see how much brighter and more vibrant Samsung is. Here, I do prefer Samsung's image, as when you zoom in, we can see how much more texture detail and less noise we get. Now, thanks to both phones supporting autofocus on their ultrawide modules, we also get macro support. And here, I do prefer Samsung's result, as it not only tends to get more in the shots, but a point of focus is also wider as opposed to the more central focus on the Pixel. Although the Pixel does have a more pleasant color overall. Both phones can also shoot at the full resolution of their sensors. 50 megapixels on the Pixel and 200 on the S23 Ultra. And if we compare the two, it's pretty much no surprise that the S23 Ultra will be significantly sharper when you zoom in. Just keep in mind that the image processing will suffer once you go into these high-res modes, and same will apply to low-light shooting. When it comes to video, the quality is surprisingly similar on both. The Pixel does have a slightly brighter image, although the sky does get a bit blown out. Now, the shadows are brighter on the Samsung, which does seem to have more dynamic range, whereas the Pixel occasionally crushes the shadows quite noticeably. Samsung also applies a bit more sharpening, whereas the Pixel likes to keep things looking a bit more natural. But realistically, you'll be happy with both in terms of videos here. Now, I do have 3 things to mention. So, number 1, the S23 Ultra can also shoot in 8K at 30 frames per second, which the Pixel cannot. So, in case you like zooming in or cropping into your video a lot, then the S23 Ultra will be better. Then number 2, the Pixel 8 Pro can use all of its lenses while recording 4K 60 video, whereas with Samsung, you have to switch to 4K 30 to be able to do that. And 3, the Pixel will have a video boost feature by the end of the year that will process the videos on Google servers in order to get this super HDR look. However, this feature isn't out just yet, and it will take a number of hours for your video to get processed. When it comes to ultrawide video, the biggest difference is really when it comes to the field of view. The Samsung tends to zoom in a bit more than the Pixel, so we do get a more ultrawide video from the Pixel, and the Pixel also has more shadow detail, whereas the Samsung tends to keep the shadows darker. So I do prefer the Pixel's ultrawide video here. Both phones also support cinematic mode, aka portrait mode video, with the Samsung being able to record in 4K 30 as opposed to 1080p 24 on the Pixel. Although, looking back at the footage, I actually do prefer the Pixel here. Its sharpness is still very comparable to Samsung's, only that its colors are much better. And the edge separation is pretty good on both, especially here towards the end of the clip while I was walking. Both phones also support action mode, which is this super steady mode for when you're running or doing other activities where there's a lot of movement. Samsung lets you shoot this in Quad HD 60, whereas Google only lets you shoot it in 1080p 30. So there's a pretty big difference in terms of the resolution and the frame rate here. Weirdly enough, the Pixel is significantly noisier despite lower frame rates, and the stabilization is also worse on the Pixel. So yeah, Google does have a lot of work to do when it comes to its action mode. But okay, what about night mode? Well, in this first image, Samsung not only has a considerably brighter image, but also one that is sharper, especially if you zoom in and you take a look at the pink flowers. Same goes for the second image, where the S23 Ultra is not only brighter, but noticeably sharper, and it is also more color accurate as the light shining on the plant pod was warm light indeed. Now, if we look at this next example, the Pixel does seem to have a more defined texture if we zoom into the road here. However, it also has considerably more lens flare, as opposed to the S23, which is a bit more mild. So now, what about night zoom? Well, in this first example of the Old Trafford Stadium, the Pixel performs significantly better, with a much clearer image, less noise, and you can even read the Manchester United text, which is incredibly blurry on the Samsung. Now, the reason for this being because Samsung's 10x module has a very small f4.9 aperture as opposed to the f2.8 on the Pixel, and it struggles heavily in low light. And because of that, Samsung will actually use its main sensor and then zoom in digitally. However, if you switch to the Pro mode, you can actually force the Samsung to use its 10x module. And this time we do get a much better result, but because we have no night mode in this case, it still ends up looking noisier and inferior to the Pixel's image. If we move on to night ultrawide, despite Google seriously improving their ultrawide hardware for better low light performance, Samsung still performs better, with a sharper image if you take a look at the fence, the grass, or the house. They're all quite a bit sharper on the S23 Ultra, although the Pixel does have a brighter image. The same goes for the second night ultrawide shot, where the Pixel does have a brighter image, but sacrifices the clarity in a number of areas, like the bushes, the fence, and pretty much everywhere else. When it comes to night portrait, this was shot at 2x on both, and I'm extremely impressed by how good the Samsung is here. It's not only considerably brighter and clearer, if you take a look at my face, but also it has more background blur, whereas the Pixel's image looks more or less like a regular shot with minimal background separation. Night video is an interesting one as Samsung does technically have a larger sensor, but also at a 4 times higher resolution compared to the Pixel, so the pixels on the sensor will be smaller. Now, Samsung is using something called pixel binning, combining 16 pixels into one for better low light photos. However, when it comes to video, pixel binning never really worked right. And this is still the case here, with the Pixel's footage being noticeably clear, with significantly less noise and also much more realistic looking colors, whereas Samsung had this purple tint all over its footage. Also, just like with Video Boost, night mode video will also be coming to the Pixel 2 by the end of the year, where every single video frame will get processed on Google servers, they would get night mode, and then pushed back onto your phone. And from the samples that Google has showed us, it seems like this will make a huge difference to low-light video once it launches later in the year. When it comes to front night photos, there is a striking difference between the two here. No clue what happened to the Pixel and why it looks so bad. It's not just my face, it's also the background. Taking a look at front daytime, the Pixel does have a considerably wider shot, which is great for group shots. I also prefer the overall look of the Pixel here, as the Samsung does look a bit washed out, especially if you take a look at my hair or the tree behind me. When it comes to front video, I'll let you guys watch this one first. Okay, and this is a front-facing video test between the Pixel 8 Pro and the Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra. So let me know which one handles the highlights better, which one handles the shadows better, and then also which one sounds better. Is it the S23 Ultra or is it the Pixel 8 Pro? Okay, so I much prefer the look on the Samsung here. The Pixel had this weird look to it where my face looked almost pure white, I looked like a ghost and very contrasty, and sometimes the bottom of my face looked too blurry. But other than that, they were both pretty good, with great highlight retention and also some pretty good shadow detail too. And then we have the front portrait mode where they're both good, but Samsung does have better edge separation if you take a look at the left-hand side of my face. I just wish that Samsung had a bit more background blur. I feel like the portrait mode effect is not quite strong enough on the Samsung, whereas on the Pixel it is just way too much. So in conclusion, which one should you go for if you care about the camera a lot? Well, it really depends on the type of shots that you take the most. If you take a lot of regular outdoor shots, then the Pixel will perform consistently better here, with superior HDR processing and more realistic looking colors. If you take a lot of night mode shots, then Samsung would do better here. If you take a lot of zoom shots, it's pretty much a tie, with the Pixel being better at lower ranges and in lower light, whereas the Samsung will get better at longer ranges. If you take a lot of portraits, then go with the Samsung, as it consistently takes better portraits. If you like taking a lot of ultrawides, then the Pixel will be a bit wider and with more natural colors. If you take a lot of video, to be honest, you cannot really go wrong with any of them. But at the end of the day, if I had to pick one, personally, I would go with the Pixel. Just because for my use case, which is general outdoor shots in daytime, this is what I'm going to take the most, and in this case, the Pixel will indeed be superior. But yeah, feel free to check out the Pixel 8 Pro versus the iPhone 15 Pro Max camera comparison too, and stay tuned for more Pixel 8 Pro videos. I'm Daniel, this has been Zone of Tech, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Zone of Tech, signing out. Cheers.